name is Zoe Waters, and I'm here with Dorothy Lardner, my grandmother.
Hello.
Okay. For our first question, where did you grow up?
In Waterford, New York.
What kind of stuff did you do as a kid?
Read books mostly. I liked reading.
That's good. What did your parents do?
My dad was superintendent of a shirt factory in North Troy. I can't remember the name of it. And my mother worked at home. She was a homemaker.
Did you have any siblings?
Nope. Not one.
Did you have any friends?
Yeah, I had lots of friends. You want me to name them?
Sure.
Well, there was Eleanor Corson and Helen McGreevy and Jean Glass. Two of them are dead. Jean Glass is still alive.
You still talk to her?
Yeah, talk to her on the phone 2 or 3 times a month.
What was life like during the Depression?
Wasn't all that bad, really. I had to wear an awful lot of hand-me-downs that were from people who were friends of my mother's, which, as I think back on it, was a little odd. I imagine the clothes were all too old for me, but they fit me.
Did they look like out of date?
No, not really. They were just dark colors, largely.
Did you notice the difference between before the Depression?
I don't remember much before the Depression. I was only 10 years old when it started. And I don't remember an awful lot of difference now.
Did you notice any big transition between the war and the Depression?
Oh, yeah. You sort of sat around and wondered which was worse, to worry about your dad or your brother or your husband or whatever being killed, or worry about where your next meal was coming from.
What did you think was worse?
Well, I thought worrying about where my next meal was coming from was better.
Was better?
Yeah, because you could always improvise. My mother was very good at making meals. And, well, I didn't have anyone personally in the war. I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of there not being any men around. That wasn't much fun. By this time, I was old enough to care. My dad was too old to go. So.
I know you were married to a man named Bob.
I was.
How did you meet him?
I met him on the train coming home from New York. And his parents lived in Troy. And I was living in New York when I met him. But then I came home and we dated for, I don't even remember how long. This was a long time ago, And then I married him. And 10 days later he was killed. Not in the war. He was a soldier, but he wasn't killed in the war. He was killed on a train, or by a train.
How did you get killed by a train?
He fell off it. I don't really know, but he fell from the train. Kill Mama from the train or throw Mama from the train. I don't think anybody threw him from the train. We were in Florida at the time. We got married in Florida. And he was at some army base, I can't remember the name of that. And I had an apartment in West Palm Beach. And he was on the train coming from his army base to West Palm Beach, which was a matter of a 20-minute ride or so. And somehow or other he fell off. That's all I can tell you about it. I don't know why he fell.
Where did you live in Florida?
West Palm Beach.
Was it nice?
Yeah. Nothing was very nice during the war, because nothing was fixed up nice or anything, but you could go to the beach and that was nice.
why did you, well, so you, after he died, you came back to Troy?
Yeah,
And you, is that when you got your job at WTRY?
yes.
How did you get that job?
When I was in Florida, I visited a friend from Waterford, and she got the Troy paper. And I saw in the Troy paper that the receptionist at WTRY was joining the Marines. So I thought, they don't have that vacancy. So I wrote to WTRY and told them I was coming home and I would like to go work for them. So when I told them when I was coming home, which I think was in February at the time. This was a long time ago, you know. And they called me. And when I went down, they said they had a receptionist, but would I be interested in writing commercials? And I said I sure would. Because I had been to school in New York to study advertising and journalism and all that kind of stuff. And so I went to work for them and wrote advertising.
Was it fun?
Yeah, lots of fun.
It didn't have anything to do with the war, though? It was just...
Not as such, no, but I was working for the radio station on D-Day. You've heard of D-Day.
Yes.
And I remember hearing it on the radio while I was still in bed. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. So I immediately called the radio station and they said, get down here right away, we need everybody. So I did, and everybody was there and everybody was real busy. I don't know what they were doing really, but they were running around being busy because there was a war on, you know? And this was the big battle that was going to end the war. And basically I think it did. Took a while, but it did.
How did you meet Walter Lardner?
He was an engineer at the radio station before he went in service. And I didn't know him when he was in service, but I was there when he got back. And in the meantime, while he was in service, he used to write letters. And I liked his letters. He wrote things like, we sat on the side of a hill making molehills out of mountains. And I liked that attitude. Because a war was, if you talked about it that way, making a molehill out of the mountain of war, sure a pretty good attitude, I thought. So I thought, I think I might like to marry this guy. Because everybody who knew him before he went to war liked him. So I thought, sounds pretty good. So he came back. And after a little bit of manipulation on my part, he asked me for a date. And we dated. And this was in March. And in July, we were married. In 1945, 1946.
Do you know how he came to, why he was working there? 'Cause he grew up in Coney Island.
Yeah,
Why, do you know why he had been working there?
just because that was where there was a job. I mean, see, this was before the war that he was working there. So they went where the jobs were, and he found that they needed somebody, and they hired him.
Did you know anything that was going on over there in like Europe and the Pacific?
Nothing more than was in the papers and on the radio at that time. There was no television then. So you just sort of listened to the newscasts and read the newspaper. I can't tell you anything specific that was going on.
Did you know what Poppy ever did over there? Like, did he ever talk about what he did?
Yes. He was in military government when the war ended. And for some reason or other, he got to see the results of the Holocaust. So don't ever tell me there was no Holocaust, because he had snapshots of it, of all these dead people. And he saw people hanging, dead bodies hanging in the sides of this building. It just sounded awful. And that is how he happened to become a priest. Because he thought to himself, how could there be a God that would let this happen? And then he thought to himself, God didn't let this happen, men made it happen. And maybe I could do something about it. So we were married 8 years before he graduated from seminary. But he did graduate as an Episcopal priest, and that is what he was when your mother was born. Your mother was the only one of the 3 girls that was born to a priest. He was still a radio engineer when the other 2 were born.
So had he converted already when he was, like, in the war? Was he still Jewish?
No, he was still Jewish. He was still Jewish when he got home. And people used to ask me what I ever said to him to make him convert. And I said, I didn't say a word about it. But I prayed a lot. And that's what happened. He decided he had to become a priest. He talked to our local priest who got him accepted into seminary. And he went to seminary. And Barbara and Wendy were little girls then. They were born. Your mother wasn't born yet. She was born after we moved to Elizabethtown, after he was ordained.
Do you know if, because he was Jewish during the war, do you know if he happened to wear, like, 2 different sets of dog tags? Because we heard that people that were Jewish wore 2 different sets of dog tags.
If he did, I never knew it. I only had 1 dog tag that he gave me.
Did you know anybody else in the war?
Not really. No. I imagine a lot of the people I went to school with were probably in it, but I never kept in touch with them, so I don't really know.
What were your feelings towards the war, like, generally?
Well, toward that war, I just sort of accepted it. I think we all had to. There was not much reason to fight it because it was there. You had no choice. But this war with Iraq, I'm very confused about, because nobody has ever told me a good reason why the United States would fight Iraq.
I agree.
Let that be in the record. That's how I feel about this war.
Was the war something you thought about a lot, or did you just go on with your normal life?
You just sort of took it for granted. It was part of life. And it lasted, I would say, let's see, it started December 7th, 1941, and it ended sometime in 1945. I can't remember the dates anymore. But that was 4 years. And 4 years can be a long time when there's a war going on. And there was a lot of rationing and things you can't. I remember one young man that worked for the radio station, who was a 4F, because any young men at that time were 4F. That meant they were not capable of fighting a war. And I don't know what was the matter with him, but I could think of a lot of things. But anyway, he was 4F, and he was kind of odd. And he came back one day and handed everybody that wanted him a pack of cigarettes. And we said, well, where'd you get them? He said, oh, I saw a line and I like to stand in line. So I stood in the line and they sold me cigarettes. So here you are. He didn't smoke.
So he was a weird guy?
Hmm?
He was a weird guy?
He was kind of weird, yeah. Anybody left home at that time was kind of weird. They had to be. Otherwise they wouldn't have been exempt.
Do you remember Ernie Pyle?
Well, I never knew him personally. I remember reading some things he wrote, but I can't tell you what now.
How did you feel when FDR died?
I felt very badly because he died in April and the war ended basically in May or June. And we felt so badly to think that he had worked so hard to bring the troops to win this war, and then he couldn't live to see the end of it. It just was very sad.
When the attacks on Pearl Harbor happened, how did you feel about that?
I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was. I was with Bob at that time. We weren't married yet. No, we weren't married yet. We were in the car driving home from New York. We'd been down to the Essex House to go dancing to Sammy Kaye and his orchestra. And we were on our way home and it came on the radio. This was at night. It had happened in the morning, but so they said Pearl Harbor was attacked, and he said, uh-oh. And I said, why? Where's Pearl Harbor? He said, in Hawaii. I said, oh. So somebody attacked Hawaii? That pretty place? Yep. And that's the United States, and that means we're in the war. And I didn't like that much.
You were scared?
I wasn't scared so much as I was annoyed. It bothered me. You know, he was going to go off to war, and here I was, not having much to do, and he was the only boyfriend I had at the time, and it was a nuisance.
He was the only boyfriend you had at the time?
Yeah.
So you had more than one at other times?
Didn't everybody? Everybody I knew did, except me.
Do you have any vivid memories of the war? Like, things you did?
The only vivid memory is the day of D-Day, when they announced it on the radio, and I had to run down to the radio station at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why I had to go. I didn't have anything to do with it, but they just wanted everybody there.
What do you think the general feeling of people were during the war? Like, the public's feeling?
What do you mean?
Like, what do you think how the public felt? How do you think the public felt about the war?
I don't think they had any specific feeling other than being very worried about the young men all being killed. And as far as the politics of the war, that wasn't talked about as much then as it is now.
So do you remember any, like, were there any, like, protesters or any people?
No, they didn't do that then. No, that all started in 1966, or 1960, maybe.
What about the atomic bombs? How did you feel about that?
I felt that was called for. I felt it was necessary because it was dropped on Japan, and the stories we heard from Japan was that the fellows they took prisoner, they would cut their tongues out. And I couldn't imagine anything so awful as anybody cutting his tongue out. So the Japanese cut the tongues out of the American soldiers. Whether they actually did or not, I don't know. But that's what was printed in the paper. So I thought, yes, the atomic bomb was necessary. It ended the war, and it was high time.
What did you do after the war?
Married your grandfather. No, I did. And I had to, one of us had to leave, and he was making more money than I was as a radio engineer, so I was the one who had to leave.
The radio station?
Mm-hmm. And then I had your Aunt Barb, and then I had your Aunt Wendy, and then after Poppy, your grandfather, became a priest, and we moved to Elizabethtown, then I had your mom.
Was she your favorite?
No, I didn't have a favorite. You don't have a favorite among your own children.
Do you have any other stories from World War II?
I don't think so. Can't think of anything specific about World War II. I suppose I should have working at a radio station, but I don't. Probably can't remember.
Do you remember, was there anybody that, like, complained or?
No. That war was against one man and his followers, which was Hitler. And he was so awful, and his followers were so afraid of him that nobody seemed to object to fighting against him. They just knew that if he were to take over the world, we'd really be in bad straits, and it couldn't happen, and it didn't. Okay,
Thank you very
that's
much.
all you wanted to know, huh?
Well, I might think of stuff later.
Okay.
If I ever come back.
You can come back. Oh, I hope you come back sometime.
Well, I probably will.
Bye.
Today is January 13th, 2005. I'm Zoe Waters, and I'm with Dorothy Lardner, my grandmother, and I'm doing follow-up questions for my interview. Last time I was here, you told me Poppy went to seminary. Did Poppy use the GI Bill to do that?
Partly, and mostly the diocese paid for it, the Albany Diocese.
In your survey, you mentioned working at Montgomery Ward Catalog Department. What did you do at that job?
I answered letters, and some of them were real funny. There was a lady wrote in and wanted a little address with a little flower on it, F-L-O-U-R.
What did you do with the letters? Like,
I answered them,
oh, you just
and then I suppose they put them on file. I don't really remember. That was a long time ago.
why did you leave that job?
I left that to go to Florida and marry my first husband.
You mentioned going to school before. What school was that? What did you study?
After high school, you mean? The Shipman School of Journalism in the Times Building in New York City. And I studied journalism, and mostly advertising.
Was it a college?
It was like a trade school, like ITT, that kind of thing.
Were you affected very much by rationing?
Not too much. I think I told you the story of the young man at the radio station that stood in line just because he liked to stand in line. Yeah, that's about the biggest effect it had on me, because the only thing that I would have used, really, that was rationed were silk stockings or nylon stockings. And they were very rare. There weren't even very many lines for those.
Did you know anybody that was affected a lot? Or like that
No.
complained a lot
People
about
were
it?
affected more by gasoline, and I didn't drive, so it didn't matter.
Because you were so boy crazy, did you find it hard adjusting to no boys being around?
I wasn't boy crazy. What gave you that idea?
You said you had more than one boyfriend at a time.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean I was boy crazy. Was I affected by, well, we all were affected by the young men being in danger. It was a very sad time, because just about everybody had a son or a brother or a father in the service. I didn't, but everybody else did, seemed like. Oh, the one thing might be interesting. The boy who was valedictorian of my high school class was the only one from the class that got killed in the war, as far as I know.
How big was your class?
It wasn't terribly big. I think there might have been, I don't remember. It was under 100, I know that.
You said that after the war you worked for the Saratogian. What types of things did you write?
Just a column. I had to cover board meetings from the village and the school and the town and the county, and write about them.
Is it the only paper you worked for?
They were the first ones I worked for, and then there was a weekly started up in Hudson Falls. I can't remember the name of it. and I worked for them even longer, doing the same thing.
What type of work as a soldier did Poppy do throughout the war?
He was in a group called ASTP, Specialized Training Program, and it was made up of young Jewish men who spoke German. And they were told that they would be discharged as officers, and they would have more respect than those who had gone to officers' training school. However, he was discharged as a corporal. And perhaps I shouldn't say this, but that's typical of the military. They tell you one thing and they don't do it.
Because the Nazis were after the Jews, do you know if Poppy felt more vulnerable?
I don't think he did, but he felt more angry, I think, than anything else. And I think I told you that he got to see one of the camps that they sent people to. Yeah, I don't think he was frightened by it, but he was awful mad.
Where, do you know what countries he was in during the war?
England, of course. He was sent to England with this ASTP program without so much as a rifle the day before D-Day. And that wasn't very pleasant, because he did have to get himself over to Omaha Beach and everything with no way of protecting himself. But he made it. And he was in England, and he was sent to Germany, and he was in Belgium, I think. See, I didn't know him then, so I wasn't too interested really in where he was.
His father was from England and his mother was from Germany, right?
Right.
Did he try to locate any family members?
Yes, he did, and I have some pictures of his family members. Snapshots.
Did they stay in touch or anything?
No.
Do you have any fond memories of World War II?
Fond memories. Well, I guess not really of World War II, because it was over when he came back. But I got the job at the radio station, and that was a fond memory. That was a lot of fun, and I probably wouldn't have been eligible for it if there hadn't been a war on.
Okay, I guess that's it.
That's it? Okay.
Thank you very much.
I haven't got anything good to offer you to eat this morning.